It was the winter of 1924. Lenin had just died, and the seat of Russian power had been opened.
Stalin would end up gaining power, wreaking havoc across the Soviet Union. His ruthless domestic policy spared no one in his effort to gain total control.
The wealthy peasants were among those that were seen as a threat to Stalin's authority. They were called the kulaks, meaning fist in Russian, to signify their economic power in the lower classes.
The kulaks were also hurt by Stalin's economic policies, which declined to consider the needs of the people. His plans of collectivization and industrialization were carried out despite of public dissatisfaction.
He used widespread propaganda to get his people to support him. Stalin was a ruthless leader whose harsh domestic policies impact Russia even today.
Joseph Stalin was born in 1878 in Georgia to an abusive father and a washerwoman. He got his education on a scholarship at the Orthodox Seminary of Tiflis, where he first became familiar with the ideas of Marxism.
In 1922, Stalin became the General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union's Central Committee. Because of his participation in the Bolshevik Party, he was able to become a part of Lenin's inner circle, giving him influence over Russian politics. After Lenin's death in 1924, he quickly rose to power in the committee and gradually established his dominance as the sole ruler of Russia.
Once Stalin gained total control, he began to eliminate those that he saw as a threat to his dictatorship. This was known as the Great Purge. The Great Purge included people who were in his communist parties whose opinions he disagreed with.
These people were accused of plotting to overthrow Stalin. In their trials, they were found guilty and executed. However, it was later determined that the charges against them were falsified by the NKVD, the secret police.
This is Sergei Linkov, who was a well-known Russian film director during Stalin's reign.
Мы строим новое государство, и в этом государстве должны жить только те люди, которые согласны с ним, которые принимают его идеи, доктрину, а все остальные нужно их уничтожать. Более того, так сказать, он даже стал уничтожать тех, кто с ним в партии спорил, дискутировал, или просто ему не нравились какие-то люди. Он считал, что они... И он их уничтожал просто, и все.
Stalin was not done with just purging those in his party. During the Great Terror, the purges spread to the common people. Those that were turned in by their neighbors to the NKVD due to commentaries against Stalin were tried and sent to labor camps such as the gulags, where about half of them died.
The group of people that were affected the most were the kulaks, the wealthy peasants.
Называли кулаками, а на самом деле они никакими кулаками не были. Это были часто просто зажиточные крестьяне, которые хорошо работали, у которых было свое хозяйство, лошади, коровы. Он считал, что они социально опасны для государства, что они собственники. И что владение собственностью определяет определенную психологию человека. Если ты собственник, то ты, значит, как бы противник советской власти, противник Сталина. И что нужно лишить человека его собственности. Таким образом изменить его психологию. И, скажем, на Украине были высланы, убиты, сосланы в лагеря или просто сосланы в Сибирь, там десятки тысяч, сотни тысяч людей. Из-за этого произошел голод на Украине.
When the kulaks refused to join the state-run collective farms called kolkhozes, Stalin declared a class war on them. The kolkhozes were meant to stimulate the growth of the Russian economy by increasing crop production. Some of the kulaks were executed when they refused to work, while others were sent away to labor camps called gulags and forced to work in terrible conditions.
Из того, что я сам видел, в 1955 году, летом, это было принято в Советском Союзе, студентов летом отправляли в колхоз помогать колхозу. Электричества нет. Радио нет.
Even after Stalin's death, the policies that he installed continued. People were still required to work in kolkhozes to help the economy of the Soviet Union.
Despite the problems Stalin faced in trying to eliminate the kulaks as a class, he was able to successfully establish a system of collectivization. He sent army units, secret police, and party leaders to the countryside to enforce his policies. Villages that resisted were destroyed. By 1930, 58% of peasant families were living on collective farms.
This was the first part of what was known as his 5-year plans, and they did not end with collective farms. He also had plans to develop heavy industries such as agricultural machinery, which he believed would aid the success of the collective farms in the Soviet Union. Soon after he announces his plans for industrialization, thousands of new factories were built and entire cities emerged in the wildernesses.
The Soviet Union advanced from 15th to 3rd place in industry among the countries of the world. However, behind these achievements there were failures. The quality of the goods was often ignored for quantity and varied greatly from item to item.
This was accompanied by shortages of consumer goods, which led to the beginning of food rationing. Peasants often protested because they did not have enough to eat and were forced to work harder to meet production quotas.
Labor discipline was strongly enforced in factories. Progress boards were displayed in factories to compare the goals of production with how much they were actually producing. Outstanding workers were known as staknovits and praised, while those who fell behind were criticized.
Those that were absent for even one day or only 20 minutes late were dismissed from work, evicted from their homes, and had their ration cards confiscated. Stalin went a step further and installed an internal passport system where everyone had to carry national identity papers and were required to stay in the part of the Soviet Union where his or her assigned job was.
А там никакой человек, никакой колхозник никуда не мог уехать. Это было рабство. Только оно иначе называлось, понимаете, вот и все.
There was widespread labor camp propaganda shown nationwide to give people the impression that Stalin's policies, especially the labor camps, were beneficial both to the economy and to the people that worked there.
Фильмы снимали о деревне, о колхозах, что там все хорошо, все замечательно, колхозники довольны. У них там клубы, самодеятельность, они поют песни, замечательные урожаи.
Stalin first began censoring the press when he gained total control over all media and literature. He would examine every literary and artistic work to determine that it would not undermine his power by using a board of censors.
Он понял, что кино – это мощное орудие, которое может его поддержать, его политику. И он всячески поощрял кино, которое способствовало его власти, его идеологии, его мыслям, его идеям. И он стал привлекать очень талантливых режиссеров. Все фильмы ему показывали, он все смотрел. И не дай бог, если этот фильм ему не понравится. И то, что этот фильм никогда не выйдет вообще на экраны. Правда, было несколько режиссеров, которые были отправлены в тюрьму, потом в лагеря.
Stalin developed a personality cult, presenting himself to his people like a god, promising to organize heaven on earth. Everyone had to praise him, and children were taught to love him more than themselves. Artists' paintings of Stalin portrayed him as a kind, loving man who was the father of all Russians, and authors would glorify him in their writing.
Authors that condemned the party openly were persecuted. Many artists and authors attempted to leave the country. Some even chose to commit suicide. Out of those that were sent to prisons or camps, about 1,500 of them met their deaths.
For Stalin, it was not enough to have the people to see him as perfect. He wanted his people to see his family as the ideal family. When his wife died, Stalin told the public that she had died of appendicitis.
На самом деле, она застрелилась. И вот все, кто знал это, и мог об этом рассказать или рассказывал кому-то, все эти люди погибли.
Stalin was a ruthless leader who was willing to do anything necessary to gain total control and to operate the USSR how he pleased. He sent the peasant population of kulaks to concentration camps, killed members of the Communist Party, and murdered suspected terrorists in a series of brutal events referred to as the Purges because they were a threat to his power. The purges Stalin constantly pioneered killed a lot of the population and instilled fear in Russia, which far outweighed the economic benefits of the concentration farming and labor.
He also changed the economic system of Russia by way of the 5-year plans and collectivization, which both had successes and failures. Whilst Stalin increased industry and the amount of crops grown, he sacrificed the happiness and sometimes lives of the peasants. This caused public dissatisfaction with Stalin and his policies. In order to fix the economy, Stalin was willing to make the lower classes despise him and redistribute their land and earnings completely.
Stalin's public relations are one of the best examples of his cruelty. Stalin censored the press and media to hide the truth from his people. He wanted them to think that everything in the USSR was going well, even when it wasn't. Due to this censoring, people were not free to express themselves. Stalin's propaganda also portrayed him as the perfect leader and overshadowed his faults. Nothing could be printed about him unless it was flattering.
The rigid control that Stalin exhibited over his country has contributed to Russia's power-hungry policies even today.